Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this morning, this afternoon, wherever you're joining in from. It's great to have everyone here today to take a look in more detail at this Prosocial Advertising Messages call for papers that we have upcoming. It's already open, and it's my pleasure to go through and introduce Marla Royne Stafford. Marla is an amazing woman. She's a full professor in the Department of Marketing and International Business at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. He was the 2021 fellow at the American Advertising Association. He's also the past president of that same organization. He's also a former editor of the Journal of Advertising, and she's received too many awards for me to be able to go through and list for her teaching and research and service. She's also gone through and she's guest edited many other very successful special issues for different journals, including the Journal of Advertising. So we're so delighted to have her going through and basically special editing this issue on prosocial advertising messages. So I'd love to turn over the floor to Marla and have her speak more about the amazing special issue that she's editing for us. Thank you so much for joining us today, Marla.
Oh, thank you, Colin. I'm so delighted to be here. I was just trying to go ahead and share my screen here, and I got some notification. So yeah, here we go. So I am going to share my screen on the special issue here and just share a little bit about it and what we're trying to accomplish, kind of where it came from and some of the things I'm looking for. So first, let me say I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. I think it's a very timely topic and a very important topic in light of society today and a lot of the issues that are going on in the world. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for researchers in advertising and, of course, related disciplines that tie to advertising to share some of their work in, of course, a top advertising journal. So the Journal of Advertising Research, obviously there's a focus here on practitioners in the research that we're looking for. So while we're looking for some traditional topics on prosocial advertising, I do want to emphasize that there does need to be implications here for managers, for practitioners in the work that we're doing. And I think that that's exciting because what it says is the research that will ultimately be published in this special issue will have an impact. And that's where some of this came from, or I should say a lot of this came from, and the special issue came from, is my work over the years. I've always wanted to have impact in a lot of ways. But I think what I'm really excited about is my work these days is actually having even more impact than ever, because my own research is looking at topics related to prosocial issues. So this particular special issue was driven from that, to say, how can we use advertising to promote prosocial behaviors? Advertising can't actually change behaviors, but it can influence behaviors. There are so many factors that go into behavioral change, but advertising and marketing communications overall do have the potential to influence behaviors, which ultimately would change behaviors and have a positive impact on people's lives. So it fits really nicely with some of the things that I'm doing research-wise and personal-wise. I'm excited to be part of a program called Leadership Las Vegas, which is all about giving back and doing all kinds of things to help the community. And so that's kind of where I'm looking to go with this topic, although obviously it's not limited to just one community, where I live, it's the community at large. And so the special issue, I'm not going to read it here, as I joked to you earlier, my students, I don't read to my students, that anybody could actually, of course, read this. But let me kind of highlight a few points that I have in here that I think are important. Within the societal challenges today, advertising, I do believe, has a very strong responsibility to communicate messages to people, to consumers, to help them make strong, smart, informed decisions. We cannot forget that. We cannot forget that advertising does have a responsibility. And again, in the light of society today, advertising, I think, has an increasing role. And I think this issue has the opportunity to play a role in some of those societal issues and making it better. So we want this special issue to actually talk about topics that relate to how advertising can affect things. And Unfortunately, we may have some negative, when I say negative results, results that show that things may not actually in advertising affect things in a positive way, because that has implications too. But the overarching goal is to say, how can we have action? How can the advertising discipline have an impact and have action on how consumers make decisions that will positively affect their lives? So that's kind of where this whole idea came from. As you noted, we are accepting submissions now. It's an ongoing submission process, and we will accept submissions through May 8th of 2003. So we do have some time. So anybody who has anything in progress and is not quite ready to submit, that's okay, because you still have a lot of time left. If you have something that's wonderful and is already ready to go ahead and submit it. We're good with that too. So the topics for the special issue are quite ranging. As the paragraph shows, that there are topics, societal issues related to climate change, public health, mental health, suicide prevention, consumers' overall well-being, widening inequalities and inequities with regard to gender, race, and wealth, even looking at for-profits who are adopting pro-social causes that they feature in their advertising. So there's a range of topics that fit into this idea of pro-social issues. The idea is that how does advertising play a role in these pro-social messages? That's what we need to focus on in here. So in this list, which is indicative, but it's hardly exhaustive, because we can't put an exhaustive list. The only thing that we can put are suggestions, because there are so many different topics that actually fit under here. But the very first topic listed has to do with possibly alleviating poverty, bridging racial and economic divides, and advertising's role in that. Advertising's role in public policy and developing public policy that can actually have implications for societal issues. Messages that can have an impact on individual behavior that can affect everything from climate change to public health. You know, and it's interesting because we have those words in the same sentence, and they're two completely different types of topics, but they're all about creating messages that have an impact on individual behavior that can affect those topics. So they're disparate, but we're looking at the same kinds of things. How can advertising have an impact? Looking at advertising campaigns that may reduce public stigma in potentially biased situations. For example, relating to sexual identity, racial identity, or any kinds of health biases, physical or mental. We don't want to forget about new technologies either, because how do we use new technologies to create effective advertising strategies in a range of these pro-social behaviors? So I am very open to traditional approaches, but new technologies. Again, the important thing is it is on pro-social behavior. The method needs to fit the topic. That's the important thing. So I don't want anybody to think, oh, this is old style, doesn't fit. It can work. It's okay. The method, again, needs to fit what is the research question, what are the hypotheses. So we don't want to forget old, but we certainly want to embrace the new. We want to look at developing messages with both short-term and long-term effects. Health-related messages that can have a positive effect on consumers' decision-making on both mental or physical well-being. Looking at some of the cultural issues that actually may play a role in pro-social messages. A comparison of what media, we have more media choices than ever before. Yes, we still have traditional media. Traditional media are still around. They're used differently, and certain media are used less, but they're still there. But then we have all kinds of new media. So we need to look at both. We need to look at how they might work together. In fact, when we look at integrated marketing communications, and when I'm teaching my class, how do we integrate new and old media in communicating some of these messages? So we want to look at traditional media. We want to look at new media. The options are just tremendous. And so we want to look at all of those. Again, don't just eliminate any one type of media because it may have an important role on that particular social issue. And we're looking for immediately actionable research findings. Therefore, we do have a preference for empirical data of some sort. The type of data, quantitative, qualitative, mixed method, again, that goes to the research question. Don't say this is some fancy statistical technique that'll work. It could. Not saying to don't do it, but don't think that the method is just going to be the reason it will get accepted. There's got to be some substantive issue, and the method needs to be, again, appropriate. And of course, as I said, empirical data is preferred because that's the way we can have immediately actionable research findings, as well as immediate actions in the marketplace. We will look at conceptual papers, but they're encouraged only if they can contribute very major advancements relevant to advertising practice on the topic that the special issue is designed to publish and promote. So again, please place particular emphasis on practitioner implications of the research findings. Something else that I want to mention that I think is important, we're really excited that JAR is now open to all kinds of samples. I think that's a wonderful thing that Colin has done in taking over as editor. It allows for more opportunities. I 100% agree with the decision. And as an AE, I'm glad to look at papers that do that. At the same time, it's important for JAR, but especially for the special issue, that we don't just say, well, we can use student samples or we can use mTOR samples. You can, absolutely you can. What's important is that the sample fits the research question and what you're trying to find out. So we can't just say we can use students. They may very well be appropriate, but it's important that they fit the research question. So for example, climate change. Climate change is very important, and economic, environmental issues are very important to college-age students. So indeed, if you're investigating a topic related to that, college students may very well, again, depends on the research question, but they may very well be a relevant subject group for your particular research. So with that, I think that kind of is a nice overview of what I'm trying to accomplish with this special issue with the help of the new editor-in-chief, Colin. And I think we're opening it up to questions, Colin, at this point.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be awesome. Yeah. I'm curious while we're waiting, and feel free to jump in with any questions you might have in the Q&A. Anybody who has any questions, it's a fantastic time to, obviously get, those answered directly from the special issue editor. I'm curious, is there anything that you think would make a paper, you spoke about this a bit with the type of data you're looking for and the immediately actionable findings, but are there other aspects that would make a paper a stronger fit or more successful potentially with this special issue?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, again, we're looking for strong findings that we can implement, but we still need a theoretical base. We can't forget that with JAR. There still has to be a theoretical base for what you're researching. That's number one. The other thing is it really does need to relate to a pro-social issue that is important in today's society. There has to be a reason for researching it. So even if somebody, I live in Las Vegas. We have all kinds of social issues here that may or may not be relevant to what we're talking about here. Indeed, gambling here is a big issue, and pro-social issues related to gambling is something I'm personally interested in. And indeed, that would fit something like that because it is actually a big thing around the world now. But we've got to look at the implications of this from a broader scale, from a global scale. We want something that has findings that really will impact a large number of people and not just one small town. Even if it is an important social issue, it may just be for one specific area. And we really want things that are much broader than that. So those would be my two things.
Broad impact.
Yes, broad impact is very, very important.
I think this is so timely as a call as well, too, especially given all the different issues we're facing in the world right now. I also wonder as well too, because so many students, I'm sure you have this as well too, right, want to start businesses that give back part of their proceeds to different causes and things like that. Would investigating topics around that also be a potential fit with the special issue?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are a lot of potential causes out there with broad impact. And even if it's one that's not highly researched yet, if it's important and it has impact, and there are existing findings and existing theories that can help position it for JAR, absolutely. Because we are in a place where we can actually help society. I really believe that. And that's the stage I am in my career, which is why I'm doing a lot of the things I'm doing. And that's one of the reasons I'm very excited about that. So there could be topics that the students, that they're looking to start businesses. Maybe it's one that we haven't thought of, and it's not listed in my suggested list of possible topics. That does not mean that it's irrelevant. There are many things, as I said, it's not exhaustive. So yes.
Although it is a great list though,
Yes.
Looks like
And
we've got some questions. So go
yes,
ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I do see some Q&A. If you
You want to pop in, and are you seeing those as well too? Yeah,
I see it, and I can go ahead in there.
excellent. Yeah.
Okay, so I have from one person about the pro-social advertising message special issue. Considering pro-social messages can be sponsored by brands or nonprofit organizations, would a type of ad sponsor, nonprofit or profit organization matter? I'm not quite clear on that question, to be perfectly honest. A type of ad sponsor, it could be an ad sponsor if it is the pro-social message. We're not interested per se in an ad sponsor if it is just a traditional commercial ad. That's not what we're looking for here. We're looking for the advertising messages, the pro-social messages that are sponsored by by brands or nonprofits. I hope that answers the questions. If I'm missing something, or Colin, maybe there's something you see there. I just want to make sure I'm answering it.
Yeah. I wonder, is it about the source of the message? So like if it's a pro-social message, doesn't matter if it comes from like a nonprofit or from a brand, or?
No, it can come from either. The source is actually an interesting question that we might be interested in. That could be a question that we might need to look at and answer, as long as the message itself is a pro-social message. So if that's what this question is about, I apologize for not seeing it clearly, but yes, it's the source of the message is a legitimate question if indeed the message that is being investigated is related to a pro-social advertising topic. Here's an interesting question. The paper, we just jumped here. Hang on, sorry, it went there. Considering the emphasis on practitioner implications, and if your practitioner audience is primarily Western, would data from emerging markets still make the cut? I'll make a comment, but that, Colin, I think maybe you might want to address that. I think data from emerging markets is important because they have a lot of different characteristics than, quote, Western, to use your term, Sunil, Western topics, Western countries. And so I do think we need to look at the characteristics of these emerging markets and how pro-social messages are shown, produced, the sources there. So I do think it would have importance here. Colin, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of brands and companies are seeing a lot of growth in emerging markets and are very curious, I think, to understand how those markets work, right? Especially if they're different. So I think it's very important. I agree with you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm your perspective as editor-in-chief. The paper words limit is 7,000, so report multiple studies can be a challenge. How many studies are expected? 1, 2, or more? Thanks. Yes, that is JAR's page limit. The thing about JAR is writing for JAR is just a little bit different than some of the other journals. And so I think it would be helpful, because every journal has their own different style. And because of the practitioner implications, it's presented in a manner that helps practitioners. So I think what would be helpful, number one, in response to this question, is to look at articles in JAR to see how they are written, because that helps you frame what needs to be included in the paper. Some journals, just any journals where the limit is much higher, they expect every little piece and little aspect. The format of JAR is a wonderful one because I think it highlights the key things that need to be in there. So that said, how many studies are expected? That depends on the question that is being asked. That depends on the research that is being discussed. So you can get published in JAR with one study, but I will say the odds of it being one small, let's just say a 2x2, 2x2 design with no moderators or mediators or anything like that, that's probably small. But the reason for that is because of the contribution. And so you're looking at the contribution. And so one little study with one or two hypotheses probably just doesn't have the contribution that we're looking for. But I say probably because it is possible. It depends on what you're doing. I would focus on the hypotheses. I would focus on what you're trying to find out and what that contribution is. If you have one study and it is a nice, clean survey, for example, or existing secondary data that is analyzed appropriately, one study might be very appropriate. If you are testing different variables, and you want to build on the first study where you do have a 2x2 design with a moderator, and then you want to build on that, what might mediate those relationships, you might need a second study. So it's kind of like when I tell my students, you know, they say, how many pages does the paper need? It needs to have what it needs to have to make your point. And that's so kind of saying the same thing here. You can have one study, you can have two studies, you can have three studies. You need to put in what answers your hypothesis and what makes the contribution. But one study absolutely can do it, but it's probably going to be a nice, thorough, complete study.
Just to jump in as well, too, I totally agree with everything you just said. But we also have web appendices you can use from the very initial submission. So if you want to put more detail and stimuli and things like that, you're welcome to, of course, you know, put things there that can be resources for people as a review as well. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Colin, for adding that. That's an important point because of the limitation that there is that opportunity. Is there a literature review of seminal research in this area that could serve as a basis for new research? Yes, there are a number. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. In response to that, thank you comment. There is a literature review. There are papers out there overall on advertising. But in general, on advertising and pro-social issues, there is a paper in the International Journal of Advertising, which is a systematic literature review about advertising and well-being that could kind of help as it serves as a basis of new research. But that is really just one paper, and it's limited to well-being. How does advertising help or harm well-being? And so it gets into some of these topics, but not all of these topics. It's a little bit different. But that said, there is seminal research in a lot of these areas because we're talking about a general topic on pro-social messages. So the literature of seminal research in general is going to be by topic. There is a lot of research, for example, on environmental advertising. There were special issues that are very much related to this. There is an abundance of new research coming out on topics related to this, but the seminal research is going to have to be topic specific in general because you're going to be submitting a topic that relates to this overarching idea of pro-social messages. So again, there are a couple of papers out there that can spawn research. I mentioned the one in IJA. And that would be helpful. But again, that's just limited to kind of, does advertising help or hurt well-being? So there's some things in there, but I would suggest looking at the topic of interest that are listed, for example, on the list of topics or one of your own, and looking for the research in that particular topic to help you find where the new research is needed. Let's see, here's a question. Excited to be on the call and learn. I'm wondering if either Marla or Colin can speak to convention expectations for submissions vis-a-vis number of studies, methodological approach, and the review process timeline for the special issue. I think this relates to a couple things that I mentioned earlier, and then I will ask Colin to speak a little bit more about the timeline and more on the review process. So as I said, the number of studies is really dependent on the research question. It is dependent on the hypotheses, and I don't want to say you need 1, 2, 3, or 10 studies. I think that you need to do the research you're proposing and test your hypotheses, answer your research questions, and provide implications. And if you do that, the number of studies is appropriate based on what you've done. Open very much to methodological approach, as I said. I will make one comment about content analysis. Content analysis is traditionally used for descriptive types of studies because content analysis is more about what is going on as opposed to what is effective. And I speak to that in a paper coming out with a couple colleagues in another issue and talking about different methods. So I think it's important that content analysis be used if appropriate and if it can answer the questions at hand. I'm not limiting that you cannot use any type of specific methodological approach. I think what's important is that the methodological approach, again, fit the questions, the research questions and the hypotheses, and that the method can answer those questions. So content analysis can be accepted, but we just need to recognize that content analysis on its own, again, is very descriptive. Often content analysis, the findings from content analysis can be used in subsequent studies, which provide a lot more insight. So I would just keep that in mind. But again, otherwise, I'm open to any type of methodological approach and number of studies. The review process will follow the traditional JAR review process, as I'll let Colin speak to. I will be overseeing the review process. I will be, of course, looking for reviewers for the special issue. And we do try to run a very efficient review process. I've been an AE for JAR, so I certainly know the process and I will stay on top of it. But at least 2 blind reviews will be conducted. It will be double blind. There will be at least 2, hoping for 3 per paper. And then Colin, would you like to speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm guessing it's probably the same. You're the one making the decisions, but I think it really comes down to the contribution, right? Like how much of a contribution is the paper making, right? And both to theory and then also to practice. Like would somebody who's an advertiser at Madison Avenue find this interesting? Would it change what they're doing? Would it be helpful to them, right? I'm guessing that. And the other thing to note as well too is it is a rolling submissions, right? So you can submit at any point up until the deadline as well, and those will be, processed as they come in as well.
Yes, thank you, Colin. So I've got this is super, thank you. Okay. I like this comment for a lot of reasons in this questions. There is strong evidence that surveys on these issues do not predict consumer behavior. Most studies seem to assume that statements can be taken as evidence for behavior and ignore social desirability. Will there be good enough valid studies for a special issue? A couple things. So first of all, you mentioned there's strong evidence that surveys on these issues do not predict consumer behavior. Behavioral outcomes are very important. Please bear in mind that this is an advertising journal, and so the focus is on advertising messages. It is not a consumer behavior journal. Again, that does not mean that we don't look at behavioral outcomes from advertising messages. Very often we might look at mediating factors that lead to those behavioral outcomes. So I did want to make that point. Indeed, surveys are basically correlational in nature. You can take survey data and apply it to all kinds of analysis, but surveys are surveys. The data is correlational. That's just what surveys do. To look at cause and effect, we must conduct experiments. That is the only way to truly assess cause and effect, is to have some type of experimental manipulation. And when you do experiments, please remember manipulation checks are important. Sometimes confound checks are important. But we can't just assume that statements on their own predict consumer behavior. And in fact, if we look at the green literature base, the environmental literature base, there is a lot of research out there. There's a lot of research out there that shows attitudes as the outcomes. And then there's other research that kind of shows some behaviors, but the overwhelming majority of research on environmental work, pro-social messages related to that, green behaviors in marketing, is that attitudes, there's this huge gap between not just attitudes, but intentions and actual behaviors. So I may intend to engage in pro-environmental behaviors, but the research all shows that I don't do it. Okay, there's this huge gap. So that supports kind of what you're saying, as well as social desirability. So social desirability is a very important concept that we would love to see in these studies. Will there be enough good, valid studies for a special issue? I believe so. There are a lot of people doing good work. They're doing experimental work. They are doing traditional experimental work, and they are also using new tools as part of experimental work. For example, the neuroscience is huge right now. JAR has had, special sections on that. And so we can look at those as outcome measures as well, as long as there is a proper manipulation. So yes, I do believe there will be enough good, valid studies for a special issue. With regard to surveys, I think there could also be some very good surveys that are published, bearing in mind that the results and the implications must be appropriate to the research that is being conducted. A survey that's reported in the special issue can have some wonderful insight. It just needs to be interpreted as such. The findings need to be interpreted as such, and the implications need to be interpreted as such. It does not mean that we have not shown a cause and effect, but that does not mean that there aren't interesting findings that can be actionable based on these results. Colin, did you want to add anything on that, or we're good?
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Next question. Do cultural studies have to be cross-cultural, or is it okay if we analyze a culture deeply? I have no problem with one culture being analyzed deeply, as long as, again, it is looking specifically at a topic that is related to the special issue and pro-social messages. So if there are interesting findings related to that and it's a particular culture, I don't have a problem with that. I don't know, Colin, if you have a statement about that. Cross-cultural studies are often good because it helps us understand more than one culture, which gives us more insight. But if the contribution is there on a culture analyzed deeply, I think it would be fine. So again, it's the contribution that we're looking at based on what it is that you are studying. There are more. Okay, here we go. By content analysis, I mean visual, auditory, or text analysis. Indeed, content analysis is any and all of those above. You are analyzing content of a certain type in specific stimuli, media, whatever it might be, existing stimuli. So yes. So again, I think as long as it is used appropriately and answers an appropriate research question, I think it's fine. And actually it builds on what I was just talking about, surveys and experiments. that content analysis provides different information. It's a different data collection, and it's a different set of results than you get from an experiment. So I do, as I said, I do encourage content analysis, the findings to be used in subsequent studies, but by itself, it does not mean that it will be ignored. Just please remember what it is that you are reporting and what the contribution is. Thank you for answering my question. I appreciate it. Absolutely happy to do so. Happy to be here with you all. And I'm thrilled that there are so many of you on here interested in this. Would you repeat that, please? On well-being, what paper? I think you're referring to the paper in the International Journal of Advertising, and it is by Gilbert et al. Yes, I am one of the et al. It was a systematic literature review. I believe it's a 2021. It's a 2021 date, and it's the dance between lightness and darkness is the opening title of that paper. So I think you'll find that interesting, and it can provide some insight into some topics on here, because the outcome of that paper did talk about areas that need research. Bearing in mind the focus was a little bit different, but it's related. So I think you should be able to find that. That was Gilbert, Stafford, Shinen, and Pounders were the authors on that paper in IJA. And then the last comment is many thanks, and you are quite welcome. So I think I've covered the Q&A. Happy to answer other questions. And by the way, I am very happy to answer other questions as they come up. Please do not hesitate, hesitate to contact me at work. It's just marla.stafford@unlv.edu. Pretty easy. Or any other questions here? I'm very excited about this special issue. Or I should say special section, because it is being set up as a special section. I think it's a potential for your work to have really positive impact in both the advertising academic community and the advertising community out there, leading to impact on consumers. And that's one of the things I'm really excited about.
So excited, very, very thrilled to have it. I think it's so timely, this topic, and I think it's so important as well too. So yeah, thank you for taking the time to talk with all of us more about your special issue, special section issue, and provide such important insight.
Are there any other questions that I can address? Or any comments, Colin, that I failed to
You have been amazing. You have been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for the overview and for all the different ideas you provided in the call as well too. And yeah, we're hoping to get a really nice set of papers to turn into articles based on this. Yeah.
So I'm excited. I want to see a range of topics that come together under this overarching thing of prosocial messages. And I will add, and the impact on consumers, because that's what I want to do here. That's what I'm excited about. JAR is read by so many professionals, by so many people in the industry there. And if we think about the power of the journal and the power of what we can do, that's where I'm at. That's what I'm excited about. So please, and submit your best work. And just I will add a couple things if that's okay, Colin. And this is, this comes from being not just an AE for you and another journal, a couple other journals in the past as well, but coming as the former editor-in-chief of JA, a couple words of advice. Make sure the paper is targeted for JAR. I'm hoping you'll send your best work, not something that was rejected by another journal, because we are a top journal. I'm just so excited about all the things Colin is doing, and I'm so excited to be part of that. So be part of this, send it to JAR for its top impact, but position it appropriately for JAR. And as I said earlier, while consumers and consumer behavior are part of this, this is an advertising journal. It is not a consumer behavior journal. And I'm speaking to that based on my experience as editor of JA, because JA is also an advertising journal. It is not a CB journal. So make sure it is positioned appropriately. Make sure it is related to the advertising topics, the advertising discipline overall, which of course has expanded. Small thing, address it to the right editor. Make sure you have the right journal name in there. If you are sending it after you've sent it to another journal, okay, we want your best work, but I get it. It's okay if you sent it somewhere else and now you saw this, that's okay. But make sure it is positioned appropriately. It's addressed to me. Make sure you change the journal title name. I mean, you may be laughing at that, but I've seen that so much. So small things like that can make a difference. Put advertising articles in there. It's important for you. It's not just to cite JAR, it's to show how your work fits within the advertising discipline. That's what's important. So make sure it's positioned appropriately in the advertising discipline. Make sure you're current on the topic. Make sure you have the current studies, the current publications that are out there in there. Again, it will help position your work, and it helps to build a broad body of knowledge. So those are just a few little tips from my experience in the editorial world here.
That is awesome. So thank you again so much, Marla. I think we've tapped out here on comments. We had so many questions. There's so many questions coming through. It's awesome.
Yes, it's great.
So thank you everyone for your questions and your involvement. We'll put this up on our YouTube channel as well too. So if you want to review anything or take a look at it later, it'll be available there. And thank you again for being open to having people email you any questions they might have as well too.
And thank you all for your thank yous. I'm excited, and I look forward to your submissions.
Okay. Have a great weekend, everyone. I'll see you all later. Thank you again, Marla. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Colin, for organizing this.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.